Melody Shari made a quiet but powerful move that completely changed the direction of the situation. There was no public announcement, no emotional post, and no attempt to influence public opinion. Instead, she chose to take legal action behind the scenes. When lawyers become involved, everything shifts. What once lived in the world of reality TV drama and social media debate moves into a space ruled by rules, documentation, and real consequences. Emotions take a back seat, and facts begin to matter more than opinions. For years, the situation involving Melody Shari, Martell Holt, and Arion played out almost entirely in public. Fans followed every detail through interviews, Instagram lives, podcasts, and indirect online comments. Reactions were fast, emotions were high, and speculation filled the gaps. But legal action removes the story from that environment. It replaces impulsive responses with careful decisions and public noise with evidence. That shift alone signals that something once tolerated or ignored reached a breaking point. After Melody and Martell's divorce was finalized, many believed the chapter had closed. From the outside, it appeared that Melody had moved forward with her life. She focused on her children, expanded her businesses, and rebuilt herself outside the marriage and constant scrutiny. What stood out most wasn't what she did, but what she stopped doing. She stopped responding to rumors, stopped addressing accusations, and stopped engaging in online back and forth. To many, it looked like she had chosen peace. But silence does not always mean disengagement. Sometimes silence means observation, strategy, and preparation. Even while Melody remained quiet, the conversation around her never stopped. Martell continued referencing her in interviews, often portraying himself as misunderstood, while Arion's social media tone became more pointed over time. Posts about being silenced, telling the truth, and feeling unheard began appearing more frequently. At first, many dismissed these moments as emotional expression, but repetition made the timing harder to ignore. Patterns began to emerge. Posts and comments appeared around Melody's business wins and public achievements. Mentions were repeated. The timing felt intentional. When behavior continues consistently over time, it stops feeling accidental. From a legal perspective, this distinction matters. One comment may be dismissed as opinion, but repeated behavior, when documented, can establish intent and impact. Patterns are often the foundation of legal action. Melody's lack of public response during this time may not have been avoidance, but restraint. Instead of reacting emotionally, she appeared to be observing and documenting. Screenshots, interviews, captions, dates, and timelines can tell a powerful story when placed together. That is how legal cases are built, through consistency and evidence rather than emotion. Reacting less often can sometimes carry more power than reacting quickly. Over time, the tone of public commentary reportedly shifted. Some statements moved away from personal feelings and closer to claims that could be interpreted as fact. That shift is important because statements presented as fact carry legal weight, especially when made about a public figure. Repeated public claims about someone's character, parenting, or integrity do not just cause emotional distress. They can damage reputation, affect business opportunities, harm brand partnerships, and weaken public trust. For many observers, the situation appeared to escalate when references reportedly involved Melody's children. Children are not public figures, and involving them in public narratives changes everything. This is often where tolerance ends and protection becomes the priority. Fans believe this may have been the point where documenting behavior was no longer enough and formal legal action became necessary. Legal notices are rarely sent because of one emotional post or one upsetting interview. They are reviewed carefully and usually address patterns that have continued over time. That is why Melody's move feels intentional rather than reactive. It suggests she reached a point where silence alone could no longer protect her boundaries, her reputation, or her family. The timing also stood out, as the legal action reportedly occurred during a period of visible success and professional growth for her. Once word of the legal notice surfaced, the shift online was immediate. Posts became vague, social media lives were shortened or postponed, and language became more cautious. This kind of change happens when legal boundaries are introduced. Legal notices commonly address defamation, harassment, and interference, especially when public narratives affect business or personal reputation. Once a notice is delivered, continued behavior can carry serious consequences. What stands out most is Melanie's continued restraint. She did not explain herself publicly or seek sympathy. She did not attempt to control the narrative. Her silence made the move feel protective rather than aggressive. It was about setting boundaries privately rather than creating spectacle publicly. Martell and Arion are now faced with decisions that carry real consequences, and the dynamics of the situation have permanently changed. For fans, this moment shifted the entire story. What once felt like reality television drama now feels real. Lawyers, documentation, and legal language bring a seriousness that online arguments never can. Supporters see Melody's decision as long overdue, praising her for protecting her peace, her children, and her brand. Others argue that legal action is an attempt to silence opposing voices. But that argument raises an unavoidable question. If nothing inappropriate was happening, why involve lawyers? Almost overnight, the online energy cooled. Conversations that once dominated social media went quiet, interviews were delayed, and old posts began resurfacing under new scrutiny. Statements that once seemed harmless are now being reviewed in context. This moment serves as a reminder that public figures are still human, with families, responsibilities, and futures beyond social media. When boundaries are crossed repeatedly, legal action becomes a way to enforce limits that were previously ignored. This legal notice represents more than paperwork. It marks a turning point where accountability replaces chaos and strategy replaces reaction. The story is no longer driven by who speaks the loudest, but who is prepared, documented, and protected. Melody's quiet move shows that silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is preparation, and sometimes the strongest response is decisive action taken without public noise. As the situation continues to unfold, every detail now carries more weight than before. Subtle changes in language, timing, and behavior are no longer overlooked. Fans are paying closer attention, noticing pauses where there used to be constant commentary and restraints where there was once emotional reaction. When legal boundaries are introduced, even silence becomes meaningful. What people choose not to say can be just as telling as what they once said freely. This shift also changes how accountability is viewed. The focus is no longer on public sympathy or winning online arguments. Instead, it centers on responsibility and consequences. When actions are documented and patterns are established, narratives lose their power to be reshaped on the fly. Words spoken publicly cannot be taken back, and past behavior becomes a part of a permanent record. That reality forces everyone involved to move more carefully and intentionally. For Melody, this moment appears less about conflict and more about protection of her name, her work, her children, and the future she is building. Legal action does not always signal aggression. Often it signals the end of tolerance. It reflects a decision to stop absorbing harm quietly and establish boundaries that must be respected regardless of public opinion. For those on the other side, this moment presents a crossroads. Continuing to push narratives or revisit old disputes could escalate matters further, while stepping back could signal recognition of limits that were previously ignored. Either path carries consequences, and those consequences are no longer theoretical. They are real, measurable, and enforceable. What makes this turning point so significant is how quietly it happened. There was no announcement, no explanation, and no attempt to rally support. That restraint shifts the power dynamic. It suggests confidence rather than defensiveness, and preparation rather than impulse. In situations like this, the quietest move often speaks the loudest. For viewers who have followed this story for years, the tone has undeniably changed. What once felt like endless drama has entered a phase defined by caution and calculation. The conversation has slowed, but it has also deepened. People are no longer asking who is right or wrong in the court of public opinion. They are asking what behavior crossed the line and why now. Ultimately, this moment underscores a larger truth. Reality television may blur the lines between entertainment and real life, but legal action makes those lines very clear. There are limits to what can be said, repeated, and implied